Welcome to the Master Your Millions podcast, the show all about your financial potential and leaving a legacy for future generations. Here are your hosts, Jason and Scott Henderson.
Welcome back, everybody. Once again, this is Dr. Jason Henderson with Master Your Millions. My co-host, Scott, is not here again today. However, I am still moving forward with the podcast. When he gets back from his vacation with his family, he'll be back with us. Today, we are pleased to welcome to the podcast someone that's going to actually help us talk a lot about team. We have mentioned many times that mastering your millions all starts with your mind and your team and make sure they're the best. This particular individual has had all kinds of experience in putting together teams or strategic relationships. In fact, after selling over $16 million of his own products and services solely through strategic partnerships, Kevin intimately understands the value of right relationships. Through his role as host of the $1 Million Relationships podcast and being the conduit of trust for the entrepreneurs he serves, Kevin facilitates strategic partnerships that impact millions of people's lives, which organically leads to millions of dollars in revenue being created. Kevin Thompson, I am pleased to have you on the podcast.
Well, Jason, it is an absolute honor to be here. I'm looking forward to just having this conversation with you.
Great. I love it. We had a little bit of a conversation before and I really enjoyed it. And I wish there was a possibility to somehow have that recorded. However, we'll attempt to recreate it here, fairly organic and just understanding how you do things. So tell me a little bit, what was the first time for you when it, like a light bulb went off and saying, you know what? A strategic partnership really is a powerful way to grow a business.
Yeah. You know, it's interesting. My very first strategic partnership, I didn't even realize, I couldn't even articulate it that way back then in 2003. At the time, I owned a cleaning company, a carpet cleaning and restoration company. And we also had a website for that business called Get Mold Solutions. That website was creating about $15,000 a month in revenue for the business. And so a friend of mine, Joe Polish, I had met in 95, and he really helped me grow my cleaning and restoration company. And every year he did this annual event for the cleaning and restoration industry. And knowing what I had accomplished with my website in 2003, in the spring of that year, him and I were talking. He's like, Kev, would you be open to coming down here to the annual event and speaking and showing everybody what you're doing with your website? And I was like, sure. And he was like, okay. And so before you come, also make sure to document what you do and how you do it, put it into a course, because a certain percentage of the folks, once they hear from you, they're going to want your help, and just make sure that you're ready to give that to them. And so we did that. And in November of that year, here's the thing, Jason, I had never spoken in public before in my life. And now there was this audience of about 200 people. Fortunately, I knew a fair amount of them. I knew a good bunch of them because I was one of them. But I had never spoken on stage before. And of course, there was the added, I don't know if I call it pressure, but I just wanted to do right by my friend Joe, you know. And I was a little bit nervous taking that stage. But as soon as I started sharing, people were totally into it. And of course, I got into it. And I spoke for about 45 minutes. And at the end of that presentation, I just simply said, hey, you know, if what I shared, if it resonates with you, and if you feel that I might be able to help you as well, I would be totally honored to do that. Here's what this would look like, and here's what the investment would be. And we ended up selling $35,000 worth of that course. And I was just like, wow, I had never experienced anything like that before. And that was my very first ever strategic partnership. And what's interesting is Joe and I, we never had any conversation whatsoever about, hey, if we do this thing, we can make all this money together and all of that. What Joe knew was that I was doing something that if I shared it with his folks, they would find it valuable. He knew that I could help him further the relationship that he already had with all those folks who attended that event. And if he thought for 1 second that I would have damaged the relationship he had with those folks in any way, he would have never put me there. He would have never given me that opportunity, regardless of how much money could have been made, because it wouldn't matter. No, he wouldn't even risk damaging those relationships. And so, it was through that process with a friend of mine that I just loved Joe. I was so appreciative of him for the help he'd given me in my life and helping me turn this cleaning business around. And I just wanted to help him out and stuff. And of course, if I could help some of the other folks in the industry too, that was a win too. And that was my very first ever strategic partnership. But yet, like I said, at the time, I couldn't even have articulated that was a strategic partnership. It was just Joe and I just doing something cool together, and doing something together that neither of us could have done on our own.
Well, when did you come to the point that you could look back and say that was a strategic partnership, right? I mean, you say you couldn't even say it at the time, and so
yeah.
There had to be some sort of evolution or education or further experience or something that you started to realize, hey, this is quite profitable for me to connect A with B and make it happen. I mean, how did you get into that? How did that start to happen?
Because at that event, there were other people there, other speakers and this and that saw it take place. And when they were talking with me about it after the fact, they were like, Kevin, that was really phenomenal. And they started inviting me to come speak at their events and stuff. And I was like, oh, wow. And they started offering, back then, teleseminars were a thing. We started doing teleseminars with other people because other people who had saw me there were like, hey, would you do this thing with my folks and me? I would like to introduce you to my folks. I think you could really help them. And so that's when I started to realize that, like, oh, this is an actual thing. And this is a thing that's done in business that I hadn't done prior to 2003. But I will let you know that it got traction so fast, Jason, that just a few months later, April 19th of 2004, I sold the cleaning and restoration company, and we moved into the publishing company full time. And over the next 12 years, we sold $16.1 million worth of that training that I had created. And it was done all through strategic partnerships.
Wow, that's impressive. And sort of simply doing something with a friend to start off with. I mean, that's really kind of cool. So as you evolved then, I mean, because it seemed like back in my head somewhere you said that you feel like you've put together over 400 different strategic partnerships.
Yes, I did.
How is it that you started to do that? Is this just a hobby? Is it people you get a kick out of? I mean, that's really neat. And it is, because talk a minute about the value in what strategic partnerships can do for a business. I mean, obviously in your cleaning business was going, yet you had this, I mean, it's almost different, if you will, because you said you sold the cleaning business and went forward with the publishing of the training and things, but it opened the door.
Yes, it did.
There's a question in there, and I hope you're getting it.
Yeah, it did. It opened the door, and I'll tell you what happened. One of the guys who was in the audience at that event was a gentleman by the name of Mike Crow. And Mike did something similar to what Joe did. Joe served the cleaning and restoration industry, teaching people in that industry how to better market their businesses. Well, Mike Crow, he served the home inspector community, teaching them how to better market their services. And so Mike saw me speak at Joe's event. He was in the audience. And so he approached me and said, he was one of the guys that said, hey, I think you and I could do something together as well. And so, but he was like, but I don't have an event or anything coming up. He's like, I do, but it's a long ways away. It's over a year away. And he's like, I think we could do something much sooner. And he's like, why don't we do a teleseminar for my folks? And he's like, would you be open to that? And I'm like, yeah. I said, we could totally do that. I said, I could do, kind of almost the same presentation, and just a teleseminar where you just get on the phone, and it's like a conference line, and you're just talking with a whole bunch of other people on the phone, And
Yeah,
so
for those that are listening, a teleseminar is your daddy's webinar before Zoom and GoToMeeting. It was just all on the phone. Kind of like what is the one that Google just had recently that was all on the phone? It was I can't remember the app. Anyway,
I know what you're talking about. Clubhouse. Wasn't it
Clubhouse. It was like a Clubhouse, but a precursor to that. So he said, okay, let's put one together, and you did that.
Oh, yeah. And Mike was like, what I'll do is I will send out some emails to my folks. We'll let them know about this teleseminar that we're going to do. And then you just kind of do the same presentation on the teleseminar that you did at Joe's event. And I'm like, okay. I was like, so we can do that. And so we did that. And Mike promoted, I think he sent like 3 emails to his list of subscribers that were home inspectors and stuff, letting them know about the event. We hosted the event on a Tuesday night. We made the offer, and we let them know we would extend it until Wednesday night at midnight. And so in that 24-hour period, we ended up making just over $67,000 in sales of that training. And once again, I was just like, wow, that was really amazing. And so what I did was, so the product that we were offering, it was being offered at either 2 or 3 installments of $397. So it was a $794 or an $1,191 price point. And most people would take the 3-pay option. And so we had all these installments of $397 that could have come in. And I'm like, you know what? I'm going to I agreed to do a revenue share on that with Mike. And I was like, I'm going to send him his money like really quickly. And so I just wrote him a check along with a handwritten note that I was just like, Mike, I really appreciated doing this with you. Thanks so much. It was just a pleasure and an honor doing this. Here's the results that we had. And we had this much money's come in already. And we'll have another round of installments coming in 30 days and 60 days. So I'll be sending you more money as when those installments come in. But I wanted to get this to you right away. And so I sent that to him via overnight mail. And I did that because I was like, I just like Mike and I appreciate him. And I bet he would appreciate getting compensated quickly. And the next day he called me, and he was like totally beside himself. He's like, Kev, I got to tell you, I have never had anyone do this before. I have never had anyone overnight me a check like this. And he's like, from start to finish, working with you, collaborating with you on this project, it was absolutely an amazing experience. And you just made it so simple. And he's like, man, all of our folks are talking about you. Even the folks who didn't invest are thanking me for doing the event with you and stuff. And so, now I would like to connect you with a few other folks that I know who they would really appreciate getting to know you and find out about what you do. And so Mike started introducing me to a few other folks, which led to some more projects. And that whole thing of just really taking care of your partner, and just really appreciating your partner, just like I did with Joe and Mike. And the whole overnighting the check thing. That just became part and parcel of what we did. I always overnighted checks. Yeah, it took a little bit more time. It's not automated like sending a PayPal payment or what have you. But the overnight check made such an impact, Jason. And it made such an impact. And in fact, over the years, I became known for that. I would be at events and stuff, and people would meet me, and they'd be like, "Man, you're that guy. You're that guy who overnights the checks." And so, and it was just a way to show appreciation for my partners, because without them, my business wouldn't have been growing the way it was. And I just was so in appreciation of them.
Right. And so I want you to articulate that, and I'm going to assume that that's number one, is show appreciation for your strategic partner. What would you say are, one, two other things that you would say is important for people to do when in a strategic partnership to make sure that that partnership flourishes? And then maybe one or two, three things that you see as pitfalls, or you've seen what other people have done that has caused strategic partnerships to fail.
Yeah. Or fail, or just not even get off the ground to start with.
Okay. Yeah.
And so a lot of people are of the mindset that so they'll reach out to potential partners and talk about, hey, if you were to promote me to your people and stuff, we can make all this money together, thinking that the money is what going to motivate or inspire that partner to want to partner with them. And it won't, because I will tell you, somebody like Joe, somebody like Mike, who we were just talking about, they do not need my help in making money. They know how to do that. They already run a very successful business. And so what they care about and what their language is, and I alluded to this before, they want a partner who is going to help them further the relationship they already have with their people, with their clients. And if we don't do that, it doesn't matter how much money could be made. They're not going to put us in front of them, And so our conversation needs to be, and this becomes a collaborative conversation with us and them of how can I bring my gifts and abilities to the table for the purpose of helping them further the relationship that they already have with their clients. That's the conversation that we want to have. And when we approach them that way, now we've got their attention, because they're all about doing that. Now they'll talk with us. Now they'll collaborate with us. Now it'll be a back and forth conversation and dialogue about how we can best achieve this. And then once we've got their attention, because we're speaking the right language, which is, their value, once an entrepreneur has a successful business, money is not their only valuable currency. There's relationships, there's time, there's energy, and time becomes a very valuable asset to them. And relationships is also a very valuable asset. And so that's what we want to talk about, is how can we add to that and be of service to them. And once we've got their attention, some of the stuff that, I mentioned the check thing. That became an integral part of what we do, is just as far as showing appreciation to our partners. A couple other things. When we would schedule a partnership and we would decide, okay, we're going to do this on this date at this time. And so my assistant would let my partners know, okay, so you're going to do this. We'll just say we're going to do this on October 30th. Well, so we will have all the materials you need. We'll have that to you 2 weeks in advance on this date to make sure you've got it in time. And so whatever materials you need to be able to share this, well, whatever date we told them, we made sure that we actually got it to them 3 or 4 days in advance of that. And we did that intentionally every time, because right from the get-go, that was the very first interaction. after them deciding, yep, we're going to do this partnership together. And so that was the first interaction, was them receiving the marketing materials. And we told them, you'll have it on this day. Well, now they receive it 3 or 4 days in advance of that. What that does is it kind of sets the tone for the whole thing. It's like, oh, they got this to us early. They did more than what they said that they were going to do. And see, we were in complete control of that all the time. And so that is the kind of stuff that you want to do to just demonstrate that you value your partners, because it's that kind of experience, regardless of how much revenue gets made. It's the experience that gets them talking about you, that gets them wanting to refer you, that gets them wanting to tell other people that, hey, I had this amazing experience partnering with Kevin. You should really look at partnering with him too and stuff. And here's why.
So let's over deliver, if you will. And other than possibly not doing what you simply enumerated right there, okay, what are some other mistakes that you've seen people do that cause, the partnership either not to get off the ground or to crash afterwards?
So a lot of people are concerned about, well, what if we do all this and it doesn't produce the revenue that we'd hoped for, And I'm like, okay, what if? I mean, a lot of times we can't control that. But here's the thing. We'll just kind of look at this situation here, and we'll go back to the partnership with Mike, and let's just say at the end of that thing, there's only one of 3 things that can possibly happen in a strategic partnership. You're going to get the results you'd hoped for, you're going to get less than the results you'd hoped for, or you're going to get more than the results you'd hoped for. So right off the bat, we got a 66.6% chance that we're going to get the results we hope for or better. But even if we get, in the end, less than the results we'd hoped for, I will tell you that when you are working on a strategic partnership like this with a like-minded partner, a like-minded entrepreneur, and you both, and maybe your teams are involved in this too and stuff, you all are putting your best foot forward. You're all in 100%. Your goal is to do the best job that you possibly can and deliver as much value to the end users as possible. But even in the end, doggone it, we just didn't make the kind of revenue that we thought we would. Jason, do you think after all of that your relationship with that person would be damaged in any way? It's not. In fact, your relationship is going to be furthered. It's going to be strengthened. And that's the beautiful thing about this, is regardless of revenue, because revenue is never our focus. Revenue is the natural and organic byproduct of using our God-given gifts and abilities through our businesses to make our biggest possible impact in the world. And when we're just focused on doing that, no matter what we're doing, whether we're doing strategic partnerships or whether we're doing marketing or whatever, when we're just, I want to make my biggest impact. I want to use my God-given gifts and abilities to make my biggest impact in this world on the people that we serve, on the partners that we partner with, on the people on my team and my business, whatever. Revenue is the organic byproduct.
So that, in light of that, sounds like to me is how your podcast, the $1 Million Relationships podcast, sort of came from that sort of mentality of, here, I'm going to work more on relationships than on revenue. Am I following the right? I mean, tell us how the podcast came about.
I will tell you the podcast. So when we launched the podcast 2.5 years ago, Jason, hosting a podcast was not even on my radar at all. Not in the
Amen.
slightest.
Same here.
But my buddy Brad, Brad runs a podcast too. He's been running a podcast for 10 years. His podcast is called Bacon Wrapped Business. And you can tell just from the name of it, Brad's a pretty laid back, easygoing guy. And he's also an absolutely brilliant business strategist. And him and I were talking one day, and he was telling me, he's like, Kev, he said, you should seriously consider hosting a podcast. And I'm like, why do you say that? And he's like, well, for one, Kev, you would do it just because you totally love doing it. You love talking with entrepreneurs. And he's like, you would do it because you just love doing it. And he's like, you wouldn't mess it all up trying to figure out how to monetize it like so many people do. But yet, Kev, you totally will monetize it, and it'll just happen organically. And I'm like, okay. I was like, I'm hearing you. But I was like, Brad, the last thing the business world needs is another Me Too podcast. I was like, how would we separate this thing apart from everybody else? And he's like, Kev, you are going to talk with entrepreneurs about their most valuable relationships. And I was like, oh, wow, that sounds awesome. I would love having those conversations, And so as soon as he shared that with me, I'm like, oh, I want to experience this. And so I just came home. Him and I had just got together in San Diego that weekend, but I came home, and the next week I started reaching out to entrepreneur friends of mine and just kind of told them what had happened. I was talking to my buddy Brad. He suggested I start doing this podcast. And I'm like, man, I think this is a great idea, and I just want to experience it. Would you be willing to hop on Zoom with me and just have a conversation? I would like to talk with you about your most valuable business relationships. And people were like, yeah, totally would do that. And I'll tell you, as soon as I had 3 or 4 of those experiences, I was totally hooked, Jason. I was totally hooked. I was like, this is amazing. And so here we are now, 2.5 years later. I think we just released our 257th episode. Hosting this podcast has been hands down one of the most rewarding and impactful things I've done in my 28 years as an entrepreneur. Because of the podcast, I get connected with so many amazing entrepreneurs. The podcast itself has become a tool to help me in facilitating all these relationships and the strategic partnerships and stuff. Because I'll tell you, because now when I'm connecting people, when I say, I just did this yesterday, I connected 2 people that I'm like, oh, here's a huge strategic partnership opportunity right here and stuff. And I want to see these 2 really start happening with this. And I had interviewed both of them for the podcast. And so what I did is I sent each of them an email saying, hey, I want to connect the 2 of you, and here's what I see. And why don't you do this? Each of you go look and go watch the other's interview that I did for my podcast, because it'll just give you a really good idea about who each other are and what you stand for and what's important to you and what your values are. And if you guys feel like you're in alignment, then we'll just take this and I'll send a formal introduction message for the 2 of you. And they both did that yesterday. They both got back to me and like, wow, Kev, that is amazing. Yes, I would love to be connected with them. And so this podcast has become this tool that is just, man, you talk about putting some serious horsepower behind what I was already doing that wasn't there before. I have got very intentional about how we record the podcast and the questions that I ask and how we do it, knowing that we're not just doing a podcast interview. We are simultaneously creating a tool that can be used over and over again. And I can tell you so many stories about the podcast and what's come from it, and the people that I just am continually getting connected with, these amazing entrepreneurs. And now we've got this body of work that when people, anytime that I'm getting introduced to somebody or they find out about it or what have you, all they do is they go look at it and they're like, the right people, they're like, oh, Kev, man, I totally am stoked to be on your podcast and stuff, And so, yeah, Yeah, and I could have never imagined that. And like I said, 2.5 years ago, Jason, it wasn't even on my radar. So,
That's really cool how you've done that, and that's it aligns a lot with the original intent of this podcast. In fact, it was my son who came to me, and we're kind of like in the same arena professionally, right? And we decided we had some overlap, and we want to talk to people and sort of nurture this along. And we've always been this, what's the purpose of this podcast? And it hasn't from the beginning necessarily been to monetize it. It's been to put some good information out there that people can help people and say, oh, well, I that person made that mistake, or this person was successful here, and this is how they went about it. And hopefully that's what's happening is there's a body of work that people are starting to see, yeah, this is what they're talking about mastering your millions, which is all about accumulating, enjoying, and passing on your wealth through having a good mindset and a team, which is similar to what you're doing, right? The team is your strategic partnership.
oh
And
my
in
gosh.
my mind, I'm connecting those two and saying, yeah, we're talking a lot about team. And it's interesting how many different people, but I've never asked about what's your most valuable strategic partnership. And that may be something I'm going to steal from you, Kevin, just so you know.
Okay.
And going further and talking to some other entrepreneurs and ask that very question versus who's the best part of your team, or what, walk us through who was the first hire, or who was the important on your team. It's interesting how many will have in the past said, well, it's been my spouse. They've been there for me and they've always supported me. Or maybe it's their parent or someone like that that's not necessarily in the business, but that's been a partner to be a cheerleader for them along the way, which I'm assuming that's similar with some of the entrepreneurs you talk about. But when you say it in a strategic partnership, they might say that differently. They might
Yeah.
think differently, right? So,
Yeah.
Kevin, starting to get towards the end of our time here. Tell me, we always like to say this. What is your next mountain to climb? I mean, what's the big goal that you have out there that you want to put out? And we also say this, that we want you as a standing invitation to come back on the podcast when you've reached that mountain, whatever it is,
Gotcha.
right? So we had
Gotcha.
when someone said, I want to give a speech to an audience of 100,000. I looked them
Okay.
right in the eye when they said that, and I said, that is a cool goal. You tell me when it's going to happen. I don't care where it is. I'm going to be on the front row. I'll be there.
Yeah.
So tell me, what is your next big goal?
Well, so I regularly facilitate and you see from Zoom saying my connection is unstable. Can you hear me okay, Jason?
Yeah, that we'll have to edit that
Okay.
out. So start over
Okay.
because it all of a sudden you're
Okay.
cutting out. So start
Okay.
over. I just asked you that question. We'll edit that
Okay.
out. So I just asked you the question and you start to answer.
Okay. So I regularly facilitate relationships and strategic partnerships that are worth anywhere from 10,000 to 100,000. That's a regular occurrence all the time. As of right now, my biggest strategic partnership to date, the two guys went on to create 1.2 million in revenue together in just under 120 days. So that's my current record.
That's cool.
And of course, yeah, I mean, I love seeing that they made such a huge impact. But like I said, the revenue is the natural and organic byproduct of creating that impact. The impact is what led to the revenue. And so now my goal is, I can now see where this is going. And my next goal is I want to facilitate a strategic partnership that is worth 10 million. And
okay.
So
that's you
that's my
said it
next.
right there.
Yeah.
When that
Yeah.
happens, I'm one of your first calls or
All right.
emails or
All
text or
right.
whatever. I know I'm in your contacts. That would be awesome. And we'll come back. We'll have another interview and you can tell us all about that and some other things that have happened. But that's really good. I love that type of thing. A $10 million relationship you want to put together.
Yeah.
And we'll have a celebration, and you
Awesome.
have a standing invitation to come back to that. Final words. I mean, what would you say finally about what we've talked about today? Anything final that you want to set out there to that people need to know? I
Well,
mean,
you guys,
obviously, we're going to put your contact information in the show
okay.
notes. If you want to say it right now, that's fine. How people get a hold of you for the fact that whether they want to be on your podcast or you help people and coach people to have strategic partnerships
Yeah. Yeah.
on what to do there. So go ahead.
Yeah. So, I have long believed as an entrepreneur, relationships are our most valuable asset. And, Jason, you guys are all about team and all of that. And, whether it's our internal team, whether it's our external vendors, whether it's our clients, whether it's our prospects, whether it's, other people in our lives. And you know what? This even carries over into personal relationships, family, friends, all of that. Just being genuinely appreciative of other people and do it on a regular basis. I make it a point every day to let somebody, if not more than one person, know how appreciative I am of them, and let them know one specific thing that I'm genuinely appreciative of about them. Because I will tell you that no matter how successful somebody is, no matter how big their business is, no matter how great things might look from the outside looking in, there is not a person on the face of this earth that gets too much appreciation. And I'll tell you, you want to open doors, just be genuinely appreciative of other people.
Thank you. All right, everyone, in the event you want to contact Kevin, we'll put his contact information in the show notes. And remember that mastering your millions all starts with your mind and your team. Make sure they are the best. We'll catch you next time.
Thanks for listening to Master Your Millions with Jason and Scott Henderson. Check the show notes for any links or contact information about today's guest. Make sure to follow the show so you don't miss any future episodes.